HOA fined my boat for not paying HOA fees. So, I bought the lake and evicted their fishing club the fine that broke the calm. I've lived in the Lakeshore Estates for almost 4 years. A quiet neighborhood on paper, with pristine lawns, matching mailboxes, and that disgusting kind of perfection that only people with too much time and too little purpose try to maintain. I moved here for the lake, not for the people. The still blue water behind my house, the sunsets bleeding orange and pink across the surface. That's what I paid for. I'm a marine engineer. I build ships. I fix engines. And I like peace, not HOA politics. But of course, they couldn't let me have that peace, because in Lakeshore Estates, the HOA is God. And their president, Marla Whitmore, thinks she's the Pope. The fine that started. Everything it started with a letter, a white envelope shoved under my door like a threat. Big, bold letters at the top. Notice of violation. Unpaid HOA fees for property. At 12 Lakeside Dockies stared at it. 12 Lakeside Dock? That wasn't even a house. That was my boat slip. Inside was a printed notice that said, I owed $475 in unpaid HOA dues. And then another $50 administration fee, and then another $25 late payment fine. For my boat, I laughed, out loud, alone. Then that laugh turned into a growl, because my boat wasn't even inside the HOA property line. It was docked in the public section of the lake, right beyond their jurisdiction. The Cali called their office immediately. Lakeshore, HOA. This is Donna speaking, said a tired, nasal voice. Hi, Donna. This is Ava Grant from 12A Lakeshore Drive. I just received a fine notice for unpaid HOA fees on my boat dock. You want to explain that? There was a pause, then papers shuffling. Oh yes, Mrs. Grant. The board voted last month to extend the HOA boundaries to include all docks connected to the shared shoreline. I blinked. You voted. You can't just expand your authority because you voted. Well, the members approved it. It's in the minutes. Oh, I bet it is, I said. Right between Marla's manicure appointments, Donna gasped. Excuse me. You heard me, I said. Tell Marla she can't tax water or my boat, and I hung up. That should have been the end of it. But HOA presidents don't like being told no, especially by women who don't kneel. The showdown 2 days later, she showed up. Marla Whitmore herself. 6-inch heels, hot pink blazer, sunglasses that cost more than my car, and a clipboard like it was a weapon. She strutted up my dock like she owned the place. Ava, she said, sugar in her voice, but venom in her eyes. We need to discuss your outstanding fees. I folded my arms. Marla, I don't owe you a dime. Oh, you do. The new HOA amendment includes all watercraft docked on our side of the lake. Your boat, the Seraphine, falls under that rule. My boat, I said slowly, is docked on public water, registered with the county, not the HOA. You can't touch it. Marla gave a fake smile. Well, the board disagrees. We're enforcing it. You'll receive additional penalties if you don't pay by Friday. She clicked her pen, scribbled something, and slapped a bright red notice onto my dock post. Property under Haute Lien, trespassing subject to fines. I stared at it. My blood boiled. This was harassment. I took out my phone, started filming, and said loud enough for the camera, Marla Whitmore of the Lakeshore HOA just trespassed on my dock to post a fake lien notice. This will not end well. Her smile cracked. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm documenting you. The spark of revenge. That night, I sat on my boat. Engine off. Lake calm. The reflection of my house glimmered in the ripples. But inside, I was burning. They thought they could bully me like every other homeowner. Fine me. Threaten me. humiliate me. I pulled up the county property map on my laptop. I zoomed in on the lake boundary lines. Then I noticed something they clearly hadn't. The HOA's official jurisdiction line, the one registered with the county, stopped 40 feet short of my dock. The lake itself, owned by a private company that leased usage rights to the HOA for recreational purposes, meaning they didn't even own the lake. And suddenly, my fury turned into something colder, smarter. I wasn't just going to fight them. I was going to bury them. Digging deeper, over the next week, I made calls. Lots of them. County zoning, water management, the local assessor's office. Turns out the Lakeshore HOA leases the lake from a holding company that barely maintained it. A company that was, get this, behind on its taxes. The lease renewal, coming up in 3 months. They were standing on thin legal ice, and they didn't even know it. Marla sent me 3 more violation letters, one for improper signage, because I put up a private dock sign, one for unauthorized flag, because I had an Old Navy flag on my boat, and one for verbal misconduct toward HOA officials. That last one made me laugh so hard, I almost dropped my coffee. Each letter fueled me more. The meeting by week 3, I decided to face them publicly. HOA meetings were held every Thursday night at the clubhouse, that fake colonial building they used as their throne room. I walked in wearing my Old Navy jacket, heads turned. Marla sat at the head table, surrounded by her little court. The treasurer, the vice president, and a few retirees who just liked gossip. Mrs. Grant, Marla said sweetly, "You're on the agenda for member concerns." "Oh, I have concerns," I said, stepping up. "Mainly that you're fining me for property you don't own." A few murmurs. Marla lifted her chin. As I explained, the board approved. The board can't override county jurisdiction. I snapped. And last I checked, the lake lease is expiring. You don't even own the water you're pretending to control. Gasps. Marla's smile twitched. "That's irrelevant," she said. "The HOA will be renewing it soon." "Will it?" I said, crossing my arms. "Because I called the county this morning. The current lessor is open to selling outright." That shut her up. I looked around the room. "I'm not paying you. I'm not bowing to you. And if you come near my boat again, I'll file for harassment." I turned, walked out, and left them sitting in silence. The retaliation. The next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with new violations. 6 of them. They fined me for unapproved exterior color, because my door was navy blue, for leaving trash bins out overnight, which I hadn't, for operating a business from home, because I was repairing a small engine in my garage. It was open war now. They wanted to break me with paperwork, but I had something they didn't. Patience and proof. Every violation I photographed, time-stamped, documented. Every letter I scanned, every interaction recorded. Because I was building my own case, and not just for defense, for ownership. The twist in the water by the end of the month. I had the name of the holding company that owned the lake, Silver Point Realty LLC, run by a man named Rick Danvers. I called him. "Hi, Rick," I said. "My name's Eva Grant. I live on Lakeshore Estates. I understand your company owns the lake adjacent to the community," he sighed. "Yeah, it's been a headache. Those HOA people drive me nuts. They're late on their payments again." My heart jumped. "What if I told you I'm interested in buying it?" I asked. Silence. Then a chuckle. "You serious?" "Dead serious." Rick laughed again. "Lady, it's a lake. You got a few $100,000 lying around?" "I'm an engineer," I said flatly. "And yes, I do." That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat back, and looked out at that beautiful lake, the one they thought they ruled. They'd just poked the wrong woman, and they were about to find out what happens when you try to fine a boat owner for breathing on your water. because I wasn't going to just fight back. I was going to own everything they stood on, and when I did, I'd drag every one of their precious fishing club members out of it myself. I bought the lake. They laughed when I said I could buy the lake. They thought it was a tantrum, a meltdown, another neighbor with a grudge, and too much drama. They were wrong. They always were when they underestimated me. Quiet money, lethal precision. Buying a lake isn't like buying a car. You don't stroll into a dealership and sign one sheet. It takes paper, patience, and the ability to play chess while everyone else is playing checkers. I didn't have time to be loud about it. Loud draws attention. Attention makes enemies. So I moved quietly. First, funding. I had savings. Enough for a down payment. But I didn't want to show my hand by wiring everything from my personal account. I contacted a small trust I knew through a former client, a private investment vehicle that handled niche purchases for people who wanted low-profile deals. The fee was steep, but I'd rather pay cash for silence than feed their gossip mill. Second, identity. I hid behind a corporate shell, a holding name that meant nothing. Granite Harbor Investments. I set up a P.O. box, a neutral email, and a lawyer who didn't blink when I asked for discretion. This lawyer, Nadia, smelled of espresso and steel. She liked dogs and hated nonsense. The perfect ally. Third, negotiation strategy. Rick Danvers, the head of Silver Point Realty, had made a crucial mistake. He treated his lake like a tax problem, not a treasure. He'd let it fall into disrepair, chased rent from the HOA, and missed payments. Small business owners who forget to pay their bills always become desperate, and desperate sellers are negotiable. I told Nadia, we'll make him an offer that fixes his immediate problems, puts cash in his pocket, and makes the HOA irrelevant. Nadia smiled that cold smile and started cutting numbers. Going undercover, you'd think buying a lake would be glamorous. It wasn't. It was paperwork, phone calls in waiting rooms, and meeting Rick in the back corner of a diner that smelled like burnt coffee. Rick wore yesterday's clothes, and that cheap bravado men use to hide embarrassment. He told me his lease had been mismanaged, and his accountant had stopped returning calls. He admitted the HOA's payments were late, and yes, he'd considered selling. How much? I asked. How much do you want to pay? He laughed. He thought I was joking. I want to fix your problem, put cash in your pocket, and close the deal this week, I said. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. You got cash? On my trust. I slid a folder across the table with the escrow instructions Nadia had prepared. No fanfare, no big reveal, just the numbers and a signature line. He took the numbers. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then he took the cash. He signed. I breathed. Legal ownership doesn't feel like victory until the papers are recorded, so I watched the recorder stamp the deed like a hawk. The county clerk's office is the only church I trust. That night, I unclipped a bottle of whiskey and sat on the Seraphine, watching the moon split itself across the water. The lake belonged to Granite Harbor now. To me. To Ava Grant, indirectly, but legally bound in my name through a shell that would make the HOA's heads explode. Legal levers and loopholes owning the lake didn't automatically give me the right to humiliate the HOA. It gave me power. Power needs finesse. Step 1. Review the existing lease between Silver Point and Lakeshore HOA. Nadia and I found a dozen weak clauses, renewable terms that hadn't been properly exercised, maintenance responsibilities that the HOA had ignored, a default clause triggered by missed payments. Basically, they'd been running the lake like a conga line and lost their rhythm. Step 2. Create conditions for revocation. Under the lease, the lessor had the right to terminate with 30 days' notice. If the lessee, the HOA, failed to maintain insurance, pay property taxes, or fulfill maintenance obligations, and they had failed on all three. Step 3. Change public perception. People feared the HOA because they were loud in public. If I could expose their negligence in public, not as pity, but as shame, the votes to fight me would crumble. The fishing club, their favorite little social club of retirees, lounging on wobbly docks. That would be the wedge. I started building the evidence quietly. Photographs of rotten dock boards, emails demanding repairs that were ignored, receipts showing overdue insurance premiums. I hired an environmental engineer, on the down low, to inspect water quality and infrastructure. The report came back ugly. Algae blooms from poor runoff control, broken aeration pumps, and a solitary, sad-looking fountain that had been non-functional for 2 seasons. I kept all of it in a folder titled, "For Board Review." It was a polite lie. It was for the public, the fishing club. Their pride, my target. The Lakeshore Fishing Club was sacred to the HOA. It's amazing how quickly petty power finds ritual. Saturday mornings, the club members would show up with folding chairs, thermoses, and a sense of entitlement baked in. They launched their boats, told the same stories, and exchanged advice about lawn fertilizer like it was scripture. They had a newsletter, a hall of trophies, and a bulletin board covered in laminated pictures of bass that were probably photoshopped. Most of them were harmless. A few were venomous, the kind of people who think rules are for other people. If I wanted to blow up the HOA, taking their fishing club's privileges away would be poetic. But first, I had to make it legal. No theatrics, no street signs, just law. I drafted a letter, crisp, formal, and heavy with the sort of legalese that makes retired accountants weep. It addressed the HOA board, laid out the lease defaults, attached the environmental report, and frankly explained the remedy I intended: revocation of lake access until the HOA met their obligations or negotiated a new lease on my terms. I sent it via certified mail and emailed copies. I CC'd the county assessor. I CC'd the Department of Natural Resources. I did not CC Marla. She had to be surprised in public. Humiliation tastes better when shared. The board's panic. The response was instantaneous and theatrical. Within 48 hours, I had voicemail messages from angry neighbors, a threatening email from the HOA's attorney, small town, big ego, and a string of text messages from Marla that read like a drooling cartoon, capital letters, exclamation points, and threats thinly veiled as community concerns. EVA. One text read, "You cannot do this. The lake belongs to everyone. We are a community." Another said, "We will sue." I smiled and forwarded the text to Nadia. "Keep them," she said. "They'll look excellent in Discovery." The HOA called an emergency meeting. They held it in the clubhouse, the same venue where they'd once patted themselves on the back for approving a paint color. This time, they looked like a school of fish that had lost its leader. Marla paced. The treasurer sweated through his shirt. The fishing club president, a man named Arthur, jabbered about community heritage like a town crier. I did not attend. I let them stew. Instead, I arranged for an environmental hearing. The county sent an inspector. He didn't like what he saw. The report was damning and precise, and written in a voice that cared about facts, not feelings. The HOA published a defensive statement on the community board that read like a confession, wrapped in denial. "We are surprised by the findings and intend to work with our ownership to rectify issues." Translation: we were surprised they got caught. The first move, a public cut. 2 weeks after the deed was recorded, I sent notice of termination, not angry, not loud, clinical. Due to the lessee's failure to comply with maintenance, insurance, and tax obligations, the lease is revoked effective 30 days from this notice. All HOA activities requiring use of the lake are hereby suspended until a new agreement is reached. I posted the same notice on the community bulletin board, and I mailed it to every household in Lakeshore Estates. But I included something else: photographs, close-ups of rotten dock supports, the stagnated fountain, the algae-slick shoreline. I included the environmental report. I attached the invoice showing their missed payments. Nobody likes to be told they're incompetent, but being shown as incompetent with pictures and bills, that's a different kind of humiliation. The fishing club went berserk. Arthur held a protest on the dock, waving an old base trophy like it conferred authority. "We paid for this," he yelled. "You can't take this from us." "Yes," I told him when I walked down in my boots. "I can. I bought it." He looked at me like he was trying to remember where he'd seen me before. Maybe from the dock. Maybe from the meeting when I'd simply stated facts. He sputtered and then moved on to threats. "You'll regret this." He spat the words like a curse. I wanted to reply with a low blow. I wanted to tell him how regretting things felt when you'd been humiliated in front of your friends. But I had something better. I had a plan. The quiet builds. Paperwork as a weapon. During those 30 days, I made decisions that would loosen their grip and tighten my control. I ordered signs, professional, engraved, declaring the lake private property of Granite Harbour Investments. I scheduled maintenance crews to start immediate repairs on the worst docks, not the fancy ones, but the hidden ones where negligence had rotted pillars and invited lawsuits. I leased a small temporary dock for public access points I intended to keep, open for law-abiding residents, not the fishing club members who'd been coasting on entitlement. I also started a conversation in the neighborhood Facebook group, but not as myself. I used a neutral profile, posted pictures of the lake's poor condition, and asked simple questions. Did anyone else notice increased algae? Who maintains our insurance? Does anyone have copies of the lease? The reaction was a mix of anger and surprise. People began to talk. They complained. The HOA's facade started to crack, and quietly, under the radar, I invited a few homeowners I knew were reasonable, younger families, new buyers who hated petty drama, to meet on the Seraphine. I told them the truth in plain language. They don't own the water. I bought the lake to protect our value and safety. I'm offering conditional access if the HOA cleans up its act. A few of them nodded, like sleep-deprived allies waking up to a new plan. Signed letters, votes, one asked. "No noise," I said, "just signatures." People asking for transparent accounting. If they want their lake back in good shape, they'll need to show receipts and meet standards. That's fair, it was. And it was surgical. The calm before the storm. On the last day of the 30-day notice, the HOA posted a petition that read like a melodramatic eulogy. Save our lake. They rallied the fishing club into a pseudo-religious fervor. They called their attorney, who sent a flurry of spaghetti-throwing letters, hoping one would stick. But the county inspector's report had already done the damage. The press of facts outweighed the press releases of panic. That night, I stood on my boat and watched the fishing club's small fleet gather under lamplight. For a moment, I felt something I rarely give myself permission to feel: satisfaction. This wasn't vulgar gloating. It was a quiet, meticulous triumph, built on patience, paperwork, and the simple refusal to be bullied. I lit a cigarette. I don't usually. And let the smoke curl into the damp air. The lake reflected the lights back at me like eyes. They'd thought they could find my boat. They'd thought they could finagle a rule that made water a tax bracket. They'd been wrong. Now they were on the ropes. And the best part, they still thought this was about them. They still didn't see the end game. They hadn't read the last clause in the lease. They hadn't considered what happens when the public record is used like a mirror. It shows your reflection for everyone to judge, and I intended to show them, fully before the season was over. 30 days later, I woke up before dawn. The lake was silent, too silent. Usually by this hour, you could hear the splash of oars, the laughter of old men bragging about fish they'd never caught, the hum of engines warming up. But today, the water was still. The fishing club had been warned. 30 days. No exceptions. Their lease had expired. Their rights revoked. And I was ready. I stood on my dock in jeans, boots, and a dark windbreaker that said, Owner, Granite Harbor Investments. My lawyer, Nadia, stood beside me holding the official notice. We weren't here to argue. We were here to execute. At 6:30 a.m., the first boat appeared. A small aluminum thing with a rusted motor and a man named Arthur at the helm. He'd been the loudest of them all, the self-appointed chairman of the fishing club. He saw me, slowed down, and yelled across the water, We're here for our Saturday meeting. You can't stop us. I smiled. Arthur, it's not your lake anymore. He ignored me, tried to pass. Nadia stepped forward, lifted the document, and read aloud. Effective immediately. All HOA activities involving the use of this lake are suspended. Any individual or group entering these waters under HOA authorization is trespassing on private property. Arthur turned red. You don't own the water. Oh, I do, I said, pulling a folder from my jacket and holding it up. Deed recorded, lease terminated, taxes paid. Every inch of this lake belongs to Granite Harbor. And since I am Granite Harbor, it belongs to me. The clash words spread fast. Within an hour, 3 more boats appeared, then 5, then a dozen. The HOA president, Marla Whitmore, showed up in her bright pink blazer, like she was marching into battle. She strutted down to the dock, holding a bullhorn and a clipboard. This is illegal. You can't deny homeowners access to community resources. It's not a community resource, I said. It's private property. Yours expired. Marla raised her bullhorn. Everyone stay calm. We'll resolve this in court. I walked right up to her. You're already out of court. You're out of time. You're out of power. She tried to snatch the document from Nadia's hand, but Nadia just stepped aside. Cool, calm, professional. Touch this, and it's assault, she said flatly. Marla's voice shook. You don't know who you're messing with. Oh, I know exactly who I'm messing with, I said. A bully who thought she could find me for existing. A president who abused power. And now, a woman standing on property that isn't hers. A small crowd had gathered. Residents, families, people who'd read my letters. Phones were out, cameras rolling. Marla realized it. She tried to compose herself, but her voice wavered. This woman is trying to destroy our community, she shouted. No, I said, projecting my voice across the dock. I'm saving it from corruption. The proof I held up the packet of papers I'd prepared. The environmental report, the unpaid invoices, the signed lease termination, and the county tax receipts showing delinquency under the HOA's name. Here's what your HOA didn't tell you, I said, turning to the crowd. They failed to pay lake maintenance fees. They ignored water quality inspections. They let dock structures rot until they were dangerous. And when I pointed it out, they fined me. I tossed one of the bright red violation notices into the air. It fluttered down like a dead leaf. I was fined $485 because my boat wasn't paying HOA fees. They extended jurisdiction illegally, and when I refused, they retaliated. So I did what any reasonable woman would do. I paused. The crowd leaned in. I bought the lake. The collapse. The silence that followed was pure electricity. You could hear the birds again. The small slap of waves against the dock. The whispers. She bought it. Is that even possible? Oh my God. Marla tried to laugh. This isn't over. You'll regret this. I looked her dead in the eye. I doubt that. Behind her, a few fishing club members started arguing. Arthur threw his hat on the ground. You said she was bluffing. Marla turned red. I didn't think she... You didn't think, I said. That's the problem. You just bossed people around. One of the younger residents, a woman with 2 kids, stepped forward. Ava, she said softly, does this mean we lose the lake? I shook my head. No, it means the HOA loses control. You'll still have access, but it'll be safe, regulated, and not run by people who use fines as weapons. A few neighbors clapped, then more. Marla froze as she realized the shift. The crowd that once worshipped her now watched her like a scandal on display. The eviction night. I walked to the shoreline where the fishing club had stored their old gear. Coolers, tackle boxes, foldable chairs with HOA property tags on them. I pointed to them. Remove everything by sunset. The dock will be closed for repairs tonight. Arthur sneered. You can't evict us. Technically, I said, I'm not evicting you. I'm evicting your club. He looked ready to explode, but one of the sheriff's deputies, who had been quietly watching from the parking lot, stepped forward. You heard the lady. This is private property now. Order's illegal. Arthur kicked a cooler, cursed, and stomped off. Marla stood alone, trembling with fury. You'll regret this, Ava, she hissed. People like you think money fixes everything. I leaned in close. No, Marla. Integrity fixes everything. Money just lets you deliver the paperwork faster. Then I turned, walked back to my dock, and watched as the fishing club slowly packed their things in silence. Reclaiming peace. It took 2 weeks for the lake to feel quiet again. No more morning megaphones. No more HOA patrols. No more phony rules about approved fish species. I hired new maintenance crews. Professionals, not volunteers, and installed fresh signage. Welcome to Lakeshore Lake private property. Public courtesy permitted by owner. Respect the water. Respect each other. Violators will be towed or laughed at. The irony made me smile. Then, one evening, as the sun sank orange behind the trees, a knock came at my door. It was a man I hadn't met before. Middle-aged, quiet, wearing a faded HOA volunteer badge. Mrs. Grant, he said, I just wanted to say thank you for standing up to them. They made a lot of us miserable for years. I nodded. It's over now, he smiled. It's better now, and it was. The aftermath. Marla resigned a week later. The HOA board dissolved temporarily under pressure from county regulators investigating mismanagement. Their lawyer dropped them as clients. The fishing club tried to reorganize under a new name, but membership plummeted. Most residents didn't want to associate with them anymore. As for me, I finally found peace. The Seraphine sat at her dock, gleaming under the morning light. The water was clean again, aerators running, fish jumping, kids laughing from nearby yards. And every time I passed the spot where that bright red violation notice once hung, I smiled, because that's where it all started. That's where they thought they could own me. And that's where I reminded them, you can't fine a woman who owns the water. Epilogue a few months later. A local news outlet ran the headline, Engineer buys neighborhood lake after HOA overreach. Residents celebrate freedom. They asked for an interview. I declined. I'd said everything that needed to be said. Sometimes revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it just has to echo, quietly, across calm water.